thingy and our AI panel. Are you all ready? Yay. And Professor Lavdas, I see you here. Were you around? No, this is your session, right?
Yeah.
Yay. Okay. Professor Lavdas was a little bit ill recently, but he looks fine now. Is that the fever?
I still am actually.
Sorry?
Well, I still am a little bit, but no fever with COVID, but
that's
no
excellent.
Fever now. So.
Wonderful. So we're going to have several speakers working with Nikos Salingaros. Professor Salingaros, would you be kind enough to introduce your group, your team, and take us into virtuality? Enough of this reality.
Thank you, Nir. Welcome everyone to the session AI and the Future of Architecture. We are going to have a full set of speakers. Zach Kane did not make it today, so we will begin with myself, and then we will have Johan Recen Larsson, whom I saw earlier, and then we'll go to Alexandros Lavdas, and then Riccardo Buratti, whom I saw, and then Michael Mahaffey, making a second appearance today, and then we have also invited Ruben Hansen, unless we run out of time, and Ruben Hansen was here just a moment ago. Let me begin with my screen. So I assume everyone can see the screen. Here it is. These are the required learning points. What is intelligence? What is AI? These are going to be posted later also by the Classic Planning Institute. Our aim is to understand the limits of machine computation and people designing and making real things. The question is, therefore, is machine-made design just as good in terms of human-made design? Will no one know the difference? Well, paradoxically, I will say that AI is going to help to make much better design. And that leads you to the fourth point, to identify the opportunities for holistic architectural training available in today's modern world. What this session will say will have tremendous repercussions for learning opportunities and training. So let me begin. AI has actually evolved to become more intelligent than conventionally trained architects. That's a strong statement, which we will try to prove. Let me distinguish for the purposes of the discussion, AI into two distinct components. One is the visual and the other one is the verbal. And let's investigate. First, start with the visual, and that is the text-to-image generation. You have visual AI that contains a whole bunch of data that it has inputted and can generate an image. So you have a word prompt and you have a text-to-image generation. The AI program will produce a photorealistic image of a building. And examples of that software are already free to use. You have Crayon, DALL-E 2, Dream Studio, and Stable Diffusion. You ask, you describe the building, and it generates it for you, a new building each time, and you can in 10 seconds ask it again, and it will generate new buildings with similar characteristics. Now, on the bottom here, I have another set of software, Midjourney, that generates not a photorealistic image, but an artistic painting, which is also very, very interesting. So what are the results? We have actual scientific results because we have asked, our team has asked for beautiful building, specifying nothing else, just beautiful building, and we get generated from AI, we get traditional looking buildings, colorful curved buildings close to Art Nouveau. This is exactly what has been discussed in this conference. This is exactly what the practicing architects are building in this conference. These are traditional looking at Art Nouveau buildings, asking for beautiful building. Now, the opposite also works. You ask for ugly building, and what does the AI programs generate? They generate industrial modernist high-rises, drab minimalist buildings, structurally top-heavy brutalist buildings. So this is a scientific result, and we have published this. I have published this a very popular article in The Critic in London. Artificial intelligence reveals what experts deny. And then we have a more scientific paper that's under review now. Alexandros Lavdas, Michael Mahaffey, and myself, AI, the Beauty of Places and the Metaverse, Beyond Geometrical Fundamentalism. So what are the lessons from visual AI? Well, the lessons are that architectural beauty is objective and it correlates with natural forms in traditional architecture, absolutely without a doubt. AI therefore promises to overturn the modernist hegemony in architecture and return to the profession of using traditional design, which is all the discussion of the present conference. However, we need to be careful because the architectural regime also uses AI, but for a totally different purpose. AI can be used, program the Bauhaus form language or the deconstructivist form language and create monsters. So the standard architecture in dominant practice today is using AI in order to continue producing what we consider to be unacceptable buildings because of the very poor human responses, the human emotional and physiological responses of those buildings. So this is a continuation of the futuristic so-called images of buildings as promoted as desirable and fashionable. So now we are moving to the next application of AI, which is the verbal. You ask the AI, what form languages create buildings best adapted to human health and well-being? Well, we have asked them and we got the answer, and the answer proves what is already measured by medical data and biophilia and neuroscience. But the regime in architecture doesn't bother to ask this because it thinks it already knows the answer. The answer for them is already the minimalist industrial style. So if you are using AI in order to promote an agenda, it is really an unintelligent use of artificial intelligence because you're not using the intelligence to find out something you don't know. This is arrogance. You think you know everything, and therefore you don't bother to find out. Game designers know this very well, and game designers have worked since the very beginning in order to create the fantasy environments that attract users. And this goes directly now into the metaverse, which is a virtual reality in which billions have been spent, most of them wasted for a reason I will outline later. But gaming environments coming into this point of time invite the users. So the gamers have used their instinct in order to create a very attractive fantasy realms. And therefore, especially in the Far East, where people live in inhuman high-rise modernist towers, this is an escape from the absolute dreariness of everyday architectural environments. The metaverse giants have made the big mistake of asking current fashionable architects to design the metaverse, and we claim in our paper that that's why they have lost all those billions of dollars, because of the result. Nobody wants to use the result. So what's in it for the future of architecture? Well, using AI, you can generate wonderful facades, renderings of drawings, and it's just one step to link that to working drawings of attractive buildings. All those architects who are still stuck with the Bauhaus images are made redundant because they're untrained in creating beauty. Most of the people who are attending today's the 3-day conference know what beauty is from their traditional background, and they can really take off by using AI as a tool to create objectively beautiful environments. And that's where the professional future lies, and therefore the existence of AI today that is going to take over, as we predict, is going to take over architectural design, will select for traditionally trained architects and will select against those who come with prejudices and are unable to adjust to objective beauty. And now let me just go through this. AI is used as the basis of VAS eye tracking, and this was covered by Anne Sussman earlier. A traditional facade draws the eye in the middle. Here is from our paper with Alexandros Lavdas. Juxtaposition, happy juxtaposition as it actually exists. You see the eye is drawn to the traditional building in front. It does not bother to look at the modernist building behind. The eye refuses to look at the modernist buildings. This is an important paper with Anna Brielman, Nir Buras, myself, and Richard Taylor, that tells you why we walk down the street, because we are attracted by certain features that are picked up by the VAS, the visual attention software. And in Ansusma's talk earlier today, this is a game changer, because now we can analyze to see if the eye is going to be attracted, because if the eye will not be attracted, it becomes just a dreary urban space, and nobody wants to use it. Now, finally, we go to the newest revolution, which is ChatGPT. You ask it a question. If you are intelligent enough to ask an intelligent question to avoid the vocabulary that picks up the prevailing architectural propaganda. And be aware there's a lot of it. So if you ask an intelligent question, you're going to get a very, very intelligent answer. And here is Richard Boudet, friend from Houston, an architect, who asked this important question: what advice would you give architects to avoid the untimely demise, namely of AI replacing human designers? And the ChatGPT gave the answer. Here's the answer: put people first. Architecture should be about creating spaces that are functional, livable, and accessible for people. Second part of the answer from ChatGPT: keep history in mind. Architecture is deeply rooted in history and culture, so it's important to understand and respect the past while looking to the future. Architects should strive to create buildings that are sensitive to their surroundings and that reflect the culture, history, and aspirations of society. This summarizes what the present conference is about. You're getting this from an artificial intelligence program that turns out to be more intelligent than 85% of practicing architects and 90% of architectural academia. Okay, on that bright note, I'm finishing now, and we'll move on to the next speaker. And the next speaker,
thank you, Nikos.
Yes, Johan Recen Larsen. Johan.
Thank you for that fascinating presentation. Good evening, everyone. My name is Johan Recen Larsen, and I'm a 25-year-old architecture student from Sweden. I'm excited to have the opportunity to talk to you about the use of artificial intelligence in architecture. I've been using AI to create classical and traditional designs, and I believe that it is a powerful tool that can help us design better living environments. With the help of AI, we can explore new possibilities and reimagine our cities in ways we may never have thought possible before. For example, by using image generators like Midjourney, we can ask AI what a Swedish livable city looks like, and it will then generate different variations of the city based on this input. By using this tool, I have the ability to enhance the resolution of a selected image to produce more intricate results. And what's truly captivating is how the AI can grasp the collective memory of a city and create a rendition of the city that is entirely new, yet still appears to be a natural fit. Another exciting aspect of AI is the use of image prompts, where we can describe the desired outcomes of an image that lets the AI generate a sketch in a matter of seconds. In this case, I asked it to generate a watercolor of a beautiful traditional Swedish street with beautiful buildings and happy children on bicycles. The more descriptive we are, the more the image resembles our imagination, and we can get everything from a watercolor rendition to more photorealistic results. AI can be best used in the early stages of the design process to further our imagination and combine human creativity with artificial creativity. We can print out the results on paper and sketch over them to change the design, but it can also work the other way around, where we input one of our sketches into the AI and to let it generate a result based on our motif and style of drawing. For example, I uploaded these elevation drawings of an Irish pub project drawn by Connor Lynch at Adam Architecture to the AI and asked it to imagine an entrance to this Irish pub. In a matter of seconds, the AI generated a plethora of design ideas that can be discussed with the client to be further developed. By using AI to generate different variations of a design with such speed, the project can be taken further faster. The speed at which one can make an iteration I find the most valuable, like here when we asked the AI to reimagine the place with people grabbing a few pints in a cozy evening atmosphere. In no time at all, I have more images from which to take design ideas that can help inspire the project. But the AI can sometimes be overly creative in changing too much of the original image design. And I would say that this is its biggest weakness. But there are ways of mitigating that by using certain prompts to make the AI result resemble the original image more closely, as we can see in this example. But in many circumstances, this weakness can also become a strength when we want a result that are more varied in order to give us more creative options. And I believe that it requires some experience with the tool to manage its creative direction. As for example, in these images, I managed to maintain the overall design of the project whilst only changing some details. In this example, I was trying to develop a kind of Swedish grace with influences of Art Nouveau. The material outcome can also be directly described, or else it is taken from the image input. Like in this case, I used a plaster model from Leon Battista Alberti to generate variations that also came out in the same material. So in conclusion, I strongly believe that artificial intelligence is a powerful tool for classical and traditional architects, urban planners, and designers. It has the potential to elevate timeless designs to new heights and open up new possibilities for creativity. However, I firmly believe that AI should only be used in conjunction with traditional methods of designing by hand. As designers, we need to harness technology to our benefit without losing touch with the human element that is essential to our craft. I do not think that AI will ever replace the value of human ingenuity and creativity in our profession, but I do believe that it can greatly aid it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Johan. And now I asked Dr. Alexandros Lavdas for his presentation.
Thank you very much, Nico. I apologize to all for my voice. It can still feel the effects of COVID. So can you all see the screen? Yes? Okay, so the title is Using AI Simulated First Glance Data to Assess Visual Coherence and Viewer Engagement. So we're changing gears a little bit here. We're going to discuss more about, well, less about generative AI and more about diagnostic AI. And I think the term diagnostic is appropriate because, as we saw earlier, the built environment has direct influence in our health. So it is also a medical issue. So I will discuss data that have been obtained using the VES software that Nikos and Anne referred to earlier. And let's start with this beautiful sketch of a lion by Nikos. And let's see what happens if this scans through VES. And this is what happens. So you see what's drawn to the eyes directly, but the whole face is covered. And there's, of course, a very good reason for that. There's a very good reason why this should be such a strong attractant, because, well, in this case, it's dangerous. And it's not a joke that we're hardwired to understand and to react to danger. There's even, as I always like to say, a specific circuit for snakes. And this must go really way back, before humans, before primates, maybe at the time where our mammal ancestors were very, very small and very good prey for snakes. Okay, so there are such things that are part of our nature, and it's understandable why they're there for our survival. So, okay, in the first paper we did with Nikos and Anne, we took a bunch of images that I had taken, and it's convenient to have your own photos so you don't ask for permissions, and scan them. So here's some results. I'll go through them quite fast. This is Certosa di Pavia in Italy. You see how the whole building is covered with this heat map, and some areas are stronger attractants than others, but there is a coherence in the heat map. And the square in St. Peter's, again, you see the coherence and also the fact that people are strong attractants. And here we are in Manchester, and you see immediately that the theatre on the left, neoclassical, is a strong attractant. The gap in the middle is because of the shadow, yes. And you see that the modern buildings on the right and the distance are as good as absent. So the same slide that Nico showed actually with this front and back modern and older buildings. Some more juxtapositions, the result is the same. And here is me molesting the Duomo in Milano, basically replacing all the details with a picture from a glass facade building and gradually simplifying also the outline. And you see how the response of the vast software starts it disengages from the building, and eventually it dissolves and it just lands on the people because there's nothing to see. Okay, and the final test was simple, actual mathematical fractals, because we've discussed about statistical fractals, which are relevant to architecture and to nature. We see that this works also with mathematical fractals. You have the Sierpinski carpet, top left on top image, and the more you simplify it, the less interesting it becomes for the VAS software. Okay, so I did the simplification with Photoshop. So I was taking out scale levels or parts of the Sierpinski carpet. And this fits very well with work that we know, this is not our work, that fractal images are perceived in a way that is different to other types of images. We seem to be specifically tuned to fractal patterns. And to be a bit more technical about it, as a neuroscientist, they seem to recruit the default mode network in the brain, which is what used to be called the vast negative network. They don't call it so much anymore, but it's related to daydreaming, mind wandering, thinking about others, remembering the past. It's not recruited when we're actively solving a problem. Again, this shows that this kind of patterns are in tune with our perceptive system. So up to this, we see that it all comes together and makes sense in a way. We're tuned to fractals and to scaling order. These details that we're tuned to have a functional utility, could be avoiding danger, could be orienting ourselves towards safety or food or the face of the mother. This was also mentioned earlier, or creating order out of chaos, creating a sense of place. And all this is perceived as beauty. Now,
Alexander, we need to end quickly.
What's that?
We need to finish quickly.
Okay, I will just go through these pictures a bit faster. When there is intricate detail, you can go to the images. You can zoom into the images, provided you have enough resolution, and you see that you still have this kind of distribution, which is even. In modernist buildings like this, you see that funny things happen as you zoom in. Okay. So then we took a bunch of images that NIR gave us, different places, and we tested the VAS scan at different levels of zooming in. I will not show each one of you of these to you separately. Just the take-home message is, I mean, the paper is out. You can see it. The take-home message is that in buildings that show coherence and buildings that are rich in detail, and these are always the traditional buildings, you can zoom in either physically with a zoom lens or in the photo if you have enough resolution, and the coherence of the VAS outcome will not collapse. In modern buildings, like look at the number 3, for example, or number 2, the more you zoom in, the more it disintegrates. Whereas look at this, it does not. Yes, in Agra, in India. Or this. Or to be very extreme, you know, this detail on the right and the detail on the left. These are details of 2 buildings at a different zoom, at a similar zoom level. We came up with this proof of principle in this paper we have out with Nikos, that if you take 2 or more zoom levels for images of one building and you VAS scan them, then the more the coherence of the VAS scan is retained, the more you can talk about the coherence of the building and for an objective correlate of beauty. And obviously, it's not the only component of objective beauty, and it does not cover all the contributing factors, but it's a useful diagnostic tool. So,
Alexander, even though you're discussing our own joint model, you have to finish.
Yes, and this is the last slide, basically. So I will not go into any more details. As I said, the paper is out. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexander. Let me call our next speaker, Riccardo Buratti, an architect from Ghent, Belgium. Riccardo, I saw. Good. Avanti.
Thank you. So I'm Riccardo Buratti, 36 years old architect, specialized in sustainability, and I work in an international context in the European Union, let's say. And I'm member of the Roundtable of Architecture, which is an association of studies for traditional architecture. My intervention will draw your attention on certain aspects to consider in order to use AI and in general every digital technology, perhaps, in a wise way, keeping it a human managed tool. The main talking points will be, in a loose order, more or less, the lack of trust in human skills and excessive reliance on machines, which is probably given by a sort of crisis of Western civilization. The implications of AI on human cognitive and imaginative abilities, the technical limitations and erroneous usage of AI technology, and some suggestions for an antithetical approach based on the nurturing of human manual and thinking capabilities. So I start with the statement that a machine cannot think like a human simply because it's not a human. The ontological impossibility of merging machines with humans could produce the opposite result of mankind drifting towards the way of thinking of a machine. As Carl Schmitt says, there is a self-identification with technology as if it was an extension of the human itself. Nowadays, for what concerns AI, this is true, in particular for many enthusiasts and programmers. So we have many people who really conceive AI as something that will design for them, giving them literally the design ideas and solutions. But this idea of AI guiding the human and in general the digital technologies taking over human intellectual tasks is, in my opinion, the result of an identity crisis and a misanthropic crisis of Western civilization that developed those technologies. Why do I say misanthropic? Because a civilization that wishes to surpass the human can just be deeply dissatisfied with itself. It is a disappointed civilization lacking of trust in the human being. Are we using generative AI because we are too lazy, because we cannot produce those kind of images or texts, or because we cannot imagine ourselves the solutions outfitted by AI? So technically, we have the generation and gathering of big data, and they are necessary to build up the database of AIs, and this data would be then processed. So in the end, they are just automated algorithms specialized on certain tasks. Therefore, intelligence, properly said, is something else, and we should call this perhaps AA, automated algorithms, not AI. So in my opinion, intelligence is specifically biological. So whatever the way a specific AI engine works, it is always based on a database. Therefore, the machine is not capable of producing anything different than what it already exists in its database. In other words, a machine cannot imagine, as I said in the beginning, because it's not a human. Plus, it has no emotional intelligence. And finally, the generated images are not inherent, lacking the consistency of construction. If you observe closely the details of an AI-generated building, they are mostly unbuildable. So when we create visual AIs with the openly stated goal of revolutionizing art, we are doing something very dangerous, because I foresee that the outcome of this will be the atrophy of human imagination and creative skills because of the misuse and misconception of AI engines. I already see around me that AI is being misused to create things and replace human skills, which are not replaceable by a machine, in my opinion. So instead of using the AI as a tool, a helper that provides variations and the hustle, the heavy lifting for a human directed process, I see that people get inspired by the AI and follow its instructions, thus in a way inverting the relation between human and machine. So I've got quite strong opinion on this, and for me transhumanism emerges from this kind of views, with the human being just one of the inputs of the machine and the ways they are developed. It might sound a bit exaggerated, but AI is one of the entry points for this condition that would mean the end of the human being as we know it. So what is my take on this? First of all, for example, an AI that could and should be trained by ourselves. This would allow more control by the human user rather than the programmers and their biases. It should utilize a feedback mechanism based on the human graphic input, like hand-drawn sketches, and avoid the automated generation of images without thought behind them.
Riccardo, time.
Yes, I'm going to conclude. We at the round table of architecture advocate for a humanist approach where technique is just a tool. So mostly it is necessary to critically review the use of technology in order to prioritize the development of human practical and inner skills. And that's what we do. By drawing by hand, artistically and technically, we do not just try to produce something beautiful, but we train ourselves as human beings, master the creative process and craft culture. In this way, we develop the consciousness that allows us to use the technology in a humanist way, conserving the role of the human being as a source and center of the creative process. I personally advocate for a very punctual use of technology in the creative process and let it express our imagination instead of constraining our design and imagination to the technical capabilities and available options given by technologies. This is also a kind of innovation because it carries on a knowledge and culture coming from the past, the traditional architecture and its principles, which are, by the way, the real sustainability principles, not the ones from Agenda 2030. So technology should be used carefully and sparsely, always having a sort of humanist approach and a very clear policing ideas on how to use it, because the real risk is to invert the relation between user, so the human, and tool, machines. And we have to avoid this at all costs. And that's it.
Thank you, Riccardo.
Thank you.
I call on Dr. Michael Mahaffey to present.
Thank you, Nikos. I'm going to share my screen. And I share the concern about where we are with AI technology, that if we let the human out of the equation and we think of it as a form of automation, we are in very big trouble. On the other hand, I do think there's a promise here. There's a potential to use AI. We went through these sort of utopian periods of first the internet and then social media, and we saw the very dark side of all of these things. On the other hand, they can be very beneficial, as we know. So what I'm going to do to illustrate some of those themes is this little account of the surprising role that Christopher Alexander, the architect many of you know well, know his work, has played in modern computing and AI. Little known, little understood, I guess. Going back to the early 1960s when he did his PhD, that was a time of the dawning cybernetic age, and we were trying to get our arms around complexity and the architecture of complexity, as Herbert Simon described it. And he described it as a nearly decomposable hierarchy. And that word nearly turns out to be hugely important, that it's these interconnecting web-like relationships that turn out to be so essential. That was a point that Alexander picked up on and developed in his own PhD thesis and later his first book, Notes on the Synthesis of Form, the idea that you have overlap, that you have these semi-lattice patterns, and these form clusters or reusable patterns that we can work with as designers. That was the genesis of his idea of patterns and pattern languages, that this was an important understanding of the real structure of things that we're working with as designers, that we can manipulate these as reusable objects, if you will. And that's the way that you can generate patterns and pattern languages. You all probably know his book, A Pattern Language from 1977, that these reusable elements could form spaces, rooms, details, etc., all of the elements of a built environment. And that became, fascinating enough, the basis of a whole movement in software. Some software designers picked up on this and said, this is exactly what we need to be able to move the objects of software patterns around and to be able to make more successful patterns, more agile patterns. And there was a direct relationship going into gaming. Wiki was a direct outgrowth of pattern languages because the wikis were used to share the pattern languages of programming. Many operating systems, many, the Cocoa software of the Apple, et cetera, all use pattern language technology. And there is a direct relationship to a neural network, to the idea that this web-like relationship is the essence of the structure that we're working with, and the fact that it does have these interconnecting holonic or holistic relationships between the different elements that we can describe mathematically and describe in structural terms. And we can use that model the same way that it works in our brains as a neural network to create a software neural network that actually can process information and can learn through figuring out which pathways through all those network variables are going to be the most optimal. It can train itself on examples if you show it many examples. And that is exactly how AI works. AI actually uses not just a few examples, but many millions of examples. It uses maybe the entire web to train itself to figure out what are those pathways, what are those patterns, what are those structures that it can identify and learn and work with and produce. And that can be very powerful for us as human beings. We can see patterns like that all over the place. And in fact, I wrote this paper talking about cities, that cities are immense networks of connective patterns built up over time, the urban connectome, like the brain has a connectome. And the information is laid down in the structure and what the biologists call stigmergy, that when we're building a city, we're actually building an extension of our own brains in a way. We're embodying our own intelligence in the physical environment that makes us smarter, makes the environment smarter. And I think this is a very powerful idea. Very quickly, I'm going to run through these are some of the AI generations. This is pretty trivial stuff, I think. Beautiful building, beautiful traditional building. These are AI generated from DALL-E. Interesting. This is ChatGPT. I asked it to do a 2-bedroom row house. It said, well, I can't do a row house, but I can tell you what it would look like. So then I took DALL-E 2 and I said, okay, give me a row house. And these are very crude results, but they're interesting how far you can go, as the other example showed us earlier. And I think what we can do as designers is take the designs that we can control, like pattern languages, for example, where we're driving that network process. And this is a new pattern language that Nikos and I and some colleagues worked on that will allow. Yeah,
Michael. Yes, time. Despite
okay, all right. So Nikos, I'm going to stop there.
No. 1 minute. Go ahead. The monumental new pattern language. But
oh, you're saying I should have spent more time on it?
No. You have 1 minute more.
Okay. All right, let me just continue then. Okay, so the point is behind Alexander's work is that growth is going on all the time. It's not always bad, as we humans tend to think, because often so much modern growth is bad. It can be beautiful, it can be sustainable, it can produce geometries that are characteristic of what we recognize as beautiful, symmetries and so on, as I was talking about before. Traditional architecture that does that because people are adapting and crafting and shaping their world. And Alexander was able to describe 15 of those different geometric characteristics that can be seen in all traditional architectures, and the fact that this is transforming over time, and that stepwise growth is proceeding through generation, through rules and processes, genetic algorithms and chemical control systems and so on. And in traditional environments, the traditional types and patterns, the design codes, the things I was talking about earlier, the patterns that are generating these structures, and the modern structures, segregated use, zoning, remote design processes, economies of standardization and scale, and so on. All of these things we have to recognize are part of a generative system, and we've got to change that system, as Jane Jacobs talked about the kind of problem a city is, that just as we're thinking about gardening, we maybe need to think in a similar way about the city, of diagnosing and improving conditions, finding patterns and prototypes, finding incentives and funding, changing regulations, building infrastructure and frameworks, and doing all that in strategic toolkits. So that, I think, is the way forward that we've got to look at. AI can be an asset in that process, and certainly identifying some of these tools. One, AI is the tool itself, improving public space. And I just ran across this quote. I love Vincent Scully talking to Jane Jacobs. Yes, the environment affects human life. There are a lot of factors, some of them financial, some of them legal, that affect human life, and they can be in conflict. And we need to recognize that we have a lot of repair work to do, legal and financially. On that note, I'll give a plug again for this conference in Poundbury, October 10th through the 13th, imcl.online. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. So now, since we are late and I have no idea how much time we have, is Ruben Hansen. Ruben Hansen had a tentative invitation for this session. Do you want, Nir, do we have time for Ruben to speak?
We have 10 more minutes left. So 3 minutes to Ruben and 7 minutes for the conversations that are going to come after. And I think that we want to, need to, we can continue this after the final presentation, which is immediately hereafter.
Okay, please, Ruben, give us a few minutes of.
Yeah, I haven't prepared a presentation, but I have played around with the software. I have explored it. I haven't done as much research as some of you have here already and showed. So thank you for all these wonderful presentations, first of all. I am a little bit skeptical as well about how much we can use this software to make statements based on this software. But I do think it indicates, larger scale tendencies, like what people seem to, identify as beautiful environments or as livable environments. But I'm not sure yet what it says more about our language, or indeed as well about our connotations with these subjects. So, but I have myself just experimented mostly with trying out various things and trying to control the imagery you get out of it, and trying it also on different levels, seeing like what would it do on eye level, for example, for a street. What can you actually generate urban fabric with it? But I see my own work with the software more as just as an enthusiast trying to get to grips with what the possibilities are. But I think, for me personally, I think this software is mostly useful for just the ideation phase of just setting like what aspirations you want to set and inspire also the public as a communication tool. I think it's a very powerful tool, because it shows, wait a minute, look at all these possibilities. Look at all these ways we could imagine cities in a new way. So I think in that respect, and that's also my role, of course, I'm more a communicator than an expert, to be honest. But I think for communication, this is an extremely useful tool. And I think we should use this in the public debate about architecture and urbanism a lot. So I think that's my contribution to this discussion.
Thank you, Ruben. So this concludes our presenters, and we have, I think, 7 minutes for questions and answers. And who is going to read the questions from the chat? Or does
I think we'll just call the people. I've been taking names because there are quite a few comments here. Fabulous, Nikos, you did a really wonderful job. Nick HB, you were the first. You want to go?
Thank you. Yes, my question was more about the use of AI as a sort of analytical tool rather than a generative tool. My background's in sort of urban morphology, so I'm interested in when we analyze urban structure, we can sometimes find that there are seemingly disparate cultural laws that affect the shape of urban form. For example, my favorite example is Arabic cities built under Sharia law. Because there's a very sort of minute rule that you can only buy a property if someone owns a property directly adjacent to it. Arabic cities are famous for their dead-end streets because they don't have blocks. They have a continuous urban form that's all tied together as one coherent whole. And I wonder whether, as we start to play around with planning laws and right to light or overlooking issues, these subtle changes, we could start to understand how those might have a more profound effect on urban form through AI. I don't see any other way of doing it, really. It's more than any human mind can calculate. So I wonder if that's a perfect place for AI's use.
I can give a short answer. The field is wide open. This is just the beginning of a vast explosion of use and misuse of AI. And what you propose is an excellent place to start. Be aware of the codes, the Mediterranean building codes. Those can be programmed. What would take 20 years to do before can now be done over a weekend.
Thank you.
Next question is Daniel Morales. You had a few comments there. Questions, thoughts, please.
Yeah, no, just that, I mean, it just seems like another tool. You know, there's been periods before where everyone has said, oh, this is going to eliminate this and this is going to eliminate that. But at the end of the day, if I approach a client and I say, look, I generated 1,000, 20 beautiful images by inputting all this, I can reach for all these precedents that I myself was moved by, thought was interesting, took a great picture of, assemble a series of images, and I can light a fire in that person's brain very quickly. But more importantly, if you're just starting out with a beautiful image, you're stuffing what is the functional solution, because architecture is basically it starts with a problem. So if you don't start with a problem, if you don't start with the DNA of the organism, stuffing a function into a pretty image, you're still going to get the same result. So architects, there's always going to be some architects that do that. That's just the way they like to practice. And sometimes I've done that if someone insists on an image, but it's never as easy as just pressing a button. So like I said, it's going to be useful for some people, but it's not taking over the world, any more than we want to hug a beautiful robot that does all sorts of things for us. So I'm not anti-technology. It's just a tool.
Next up is Ann Sussman. Did you have any thoughts, questions?
I thought that was really fascinating. It was absolutely fascinating. I'm more worried about finance, capitalism, and AI. That's another conversation. But I think that the way the real estate industry is monetized and the way financial capitalism is exponentially growing, we're getting the zombie architecture now in our cities where things are just built to make capitalism concrete. They're buildings that aren't even designed to be lived in. And that the power of that finance capitalism is gobsmacking. And I'm not sure what we can do.
Here.
I want to answer Anne. AI is a powerful tool. It can be used for good. It can be used for evil. So here is where I disagree with Riccardo. If we, the good guys and the good gals, don't use AI, the bad side is going to use it to make millions of dollars and destroy our cities and create ugliness. That's why I see a certain pressing need to engage.
Okay, next is Vitruvius Grind.
We're not hearing
Vitruvius
anything.
Grind, you're up.
Phil has his hand up.
Yeah, Phil has his hand up.
I didn't see that. Phil, go for it.
I'm happy. I kind of think of it as a tool. And I remember reading about hierarchically hidden Markov models from Kurzweil, who, was a pioneer in this area. But also every time I see all these images are put together and then they come out with an idea, I'm thinking when I'm designing, I close my eyes. I'm in a three-dimensional space walking down the street. If I'm drawing, I'm never drawing a bed. I'm in the bedroom and I'm opening a door and looking out the window, even though I'm doing it in 2 dimensions. And I don't know if the computer's doing that, but it would be wonderful to be able to ask the computer, like, just like it was a dog, to fetch something for you. We were doing a project with an 11-sided figure. I said, is there a way to construct an 11-sided figure? If I could just ask that question that way, for me, that's fantastic. I mean, I was able to find a way to construct an 11-sided figure. There's an enneagram or something. It's a crazy number. So I just think if it's another kind of tool, but then you have to decide, well, what do you want in this supermarket of possibilities it gives you? But I'm not sure that's the problem. I think what Ann Sussman just said is part of the problem, because there are people who know how to put bricks together in a gazillion ways. If you simply ask them and they come up and say, well, I did, oh, Mr. Architect, you want to do that. So, well, you're the mason, come up with some ideas. And all of a sudden his head explodes and his life is enriched, but it doesn't give you a ridiculous return in 3 years on a project that you flip, which is the truth for some developers. They don't really care what's going to happen 3 years later, because their financial market, they're just flipping that building. And I think that's part of the problem. That, and of course, the population of the world eating it alive. I'll stop there.
I think these are really great issues. We've been thinking about it here, working with Nikos and Zach Kane recently, and I'm inviting anybody else. I think it's okay with you, right, Nikos, to invite anybody else who wants to participate in kind of taking a look at what this whole architecture and AI might be. Some of the stuff we saw is really compelling. Some of it is just plain old weird. I actually spent like a whole week trying to understand what intelligence is and what artificial intelligence is. And I found out that all this ChatGPT, I think that was them, was based on, I don't know how many years of people in Kenya inputting the data from the internet up to 2021. So it's already 2 years old at $2 an hour. So that's the mechanical Turk all over it. And the thing is that it's being, that this mechanical Turk, this guy over here in the, this is what, and if you don't know the story, you can find out about, but the mechanical Turk is dressed in the emperor's new clothes. So I'll just tell you that recently in interviewing potential students for the CPI, for the CPA, the academy, we've been asking people, have you ever heard of the emperor's new clothes? They don't teach that anymore. So we are losing our common language, like it or not. Everybody knows the Little Mermaid. Nobody knows that it came from Anderson and so on. But thank you for letting me share that with you.